Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Ras Al Khaimah Fine Arts Festival. My name is Ethan David Lee. I'm the Programs and Outreach Associate for the Qasimi Foundation and at the festival. And today, for our speaker series, we're going to be covering the world of grants and discussing how you can advance your career through institutional funding. So I'm joined by three of the festival's program participants and grant awardees, Abhirami Suresh, who is the RAKFAF Curatorial Development Program Curator, Kirsten Decker, who is one of our US mission to the UAE Grant artists, and Perryhan El-Ashmawi, who is our Artist-in-Residence. And all of their work can be seen at the festival. So Abhirami's curation is in Bait 8, Kirsten's work is in Bait 7, and Perry's work can be found in Bait 9. So I know my voice is carrying around the entire site, so if you're there right now, please check it out and then come over to the stage to hear them talk, and they'll be answering questions later. So without further ado, I would like to get into our chat today. Starting off with Abhirami and then maybe going down, can you introduce yourself, your craft, and then your relationship with the festival?
My name is Abhirami. I'm a Dubai-based arts and creative researcher. I currently manage the library at Jameel Arts Center, and I am the recipient of the RAKFAF Curatorial Development Program. So I curated the show Where We Dwell that you can find in Bait 8. My personal practice revolves around nuances of human experience, so how we sort of experience the world around us, and the kind of information that we draw from the same.
Hi, I'm Kirsten, and I'm a visual artist that uses mostly photography and some mixed media. I'm Dubai-based, and I mostly work in photography, and this exhibit is all photographs. And I mostly work with telling a narrative through visual means.
Can you tell us a little bit more about sort of the background of maybe the exhibition that you have going on in Bait 7?
Sure. So it's a series of photographs that are more than what is exhibited there, called Wanderlust, and they were about creating just kind of another reality through time and space and fantasy as a sort of escapism from the day-to-day and the sort of like emotional box that I felt in.
Hey everyone, my name is Perry, well, Perryhan, but Perry for short. I'm a visual artist based in Dubai, and I was fortunate to have an artist-in-residency here with the Qasimi Foundation in RAK, and I spent 6 months in RAK developing a collective of work that I gained research and inspiration from by being based in Ras Al Khaimah. My work explores the old and the new, the East meeting Western influences, and when I came to Ras Al Khaimah, I wanted to explore more of the artisan side of the Emirati culture and handicrafts, and that's what I incorporated into my work. Yeah.
Thank you. So really today I want to give an opportunity to maybe new artists and curators who haven't had had never really thought about institutional funding, and perhaps where they can start to get going on this process. So for you, can you talk about sort of your process of applying for your respective programs, and how did you find out about it? Why did you make the decision to apply, and then what were those first steps that you did to ensure that your application was so successful? So Abhirami, if we can maybe start with you.
I found out about the program through social media, actually on Instagram. They had ads running for the open call, and I had worked as a curator when I was in university, and I wanted an opportunity to do it professionally, and this came at the right time. I had just graduated, I just finished a show in university itself, and I wanted to explore how could I apply those theoretical things that I learned in a controlled environment in a actual real life situation. So the process of it was me sort of figuring out, okay, the theme of the festival is journey. What can I tell about the idea of a journey through the sort of things that I like to explore? So it involved in the beginning, a lot of writing, figuring out what my perception of journey is and where I sort of stand on this topic, and then putting together a short proposal of sorts that can be very easily understood by someone who's reading it as well. And it was a bit nerve-wracking, of course, because I'd never done something like this before. And this was then that first opportunity for me to dip my toe into doing it professionally as well.
Was there a lot of sort of pre-research that you were doing even while writing the proposal?
Yes, of course. So the sort of topic is something I've been interested in for a while. So in university studying exhibition design, we used to talk a lot about the idea of space versus place and what makes a space become a place for someone. And there was a chapter in one of my favorite books explores the same idea. And I wanted to apply my own sort of understandings and perceptions of how I've experienced my life and the places that are important to me in crafting this proposal. So this proposal then became this sort of process or this thing that I could make to talk about the same thing.
Thank you. And then Kirsten, for you, kind of talk about how you came to be applying for the US Mission Program.
Sure. So over the last couple of years, I've applied for a few things, open calls, but my background used to be in writing grants for organizations. So this was the first proposal I ever wrote for my own for my own self, and it was another American artist that let me know about the open call. So luckily, I had just finished the series in July. So when I saw what the theme was, I thought, I need to do this because I feel like the photographs were relevant right now. And if I waited any longer, it just wouldn't be, maybe. Even though they're a lot more than about the pandemic, but I think there's an aspect that is related to that. So I also had workshopped the whole series with a group of artists that I work with remotely. So I had already done a lot of writing about the photos. And I think that's something that's so important for artists sometimes we just want the images to speak for themselves, but it's really important, even if it's just journaling, to articulate your thoughts and your process. So I was able to kind of put all of that work that I had just done the previous 3 months before the proposal deadline, I was able to put it into the proposal.
Thank you. And Perry, any further thoughts from you?
Well, I think as an artist, I'm constantly trying to find different opportunities to apply to and gain some advantage from all these institutes that provide grants and artist residencies. And I think it was during COVID where I was in that constant search for opportunities. I think for a lot of artists, we hit hard. So I came across the Qasimi Foundation's website, and I saw that it was a residency program based in the UAE. And that to me was really different because a lot of the programs I applied to were outside, and with COVID and the risk of traveling, it was, I wasn't sure about it, so I said, okay, let me give it a chance to apply. And I think it wasn't till 6 or 8 months later that I heard back, and I was really happy. And I said, this is something nice. This is a new opportunity to explore more of the Emirates. And I strongly encourage a lot of artists to always apply whenever you see an art institute or any foundation opening up opportunities to young emerging artists. I think it gives a lot of benefits in terms of showcasing your work and kind of growing your practice as well. Yeah.
Perry, for the next question, maybe continuing with you here, because I know you've applied to, you just said it there, you've applied to a lot of grants and a lot of programs. What advice would you give to artists applying for their first program or grant?
I think you shouldn't be afraid to get rejected. That's one. And also, when you apply, do your homework. See if the institute and platform suits your line of work. A lot of times, artists get disappointed when they apply to, say, a gallery or institute, and the works that they showcase or they support isn't in line with what the artist practices. So I think the artist has to do their homework in terms of what are they applying for, what do they want to get out of it, and that helps a lot in terms of having a higher chance of being able to get accepted. But my advice is keep searching, do your homework, do a background study on where you're applying to and what you're applying to, and that gives you more of an advantage to understand if it suits you and suits your practice.
Yeah, and that's such a, moving back to Abhirami, this is something we noticed with your application, is that you were talking about doing that research, and we really noticed that, and that it does make a huge difference. We're very interested when we see applications that really match what our interests are. For Kirsten and Abhirami, do you have anything else to add after what Perry said on any advice that you would give to first-time applicants?
Well, I think rejection never feels great, but the more you put yourself out there, the less it's going to sting, because you've always got other things going, and you never know what somebody's looking for, and it's not because your work isn't great, it might just not suit exactly what their goals are for the project. So I think doing that research and really when everything aligns, it's better, but you just keep trying. Because you will get something.
Like, even in a rejection, do you think there's something that can be learned about your work in maybe the process? Can maybe one of you talk about that?
Learning about the process?
Like, can you learn, even in rejection, is there opportunity to learn within the process of maybe writing the grant?
Yeah, I think even writing the grant is challenging, don't you think? Like, it's
a lot of work. It's a lot of good homework, and I think sometimes when also if you apply for something and you don't get it, I think I did a lot more writing before this, and I did a lot of writing submissions, and those are harsh rejections. Sometimes it does help you also face like how your work can be better, especially if you get specific feedback, and those are always good ones to submit. Sometimes you do get feedback, and it's just like going to school. You just keep learning and keep trying and getting better.
I think, Ethan, it's really hard for artists to express their work in writing, especially, right? So maybe when you apply to grants, it gives you that opportunity to see how things sound in writing, and it gives you more clarity about your work as well. But yeah.
Like the very active writing and trying to verbalize it makes you really understand your work.
Yeah,
makes
definitely.
yourself.
Sort of puts it objectively in a way, because as artists we're so sensitive and we sort of take everything to heart, and if you take when you get a rejection, it goes straight to the heart as well. So the whole writing it objectively, it puts things into perspective as well, the sort of work that you do. So I think, just like Kirsten was saying, it helps so much to put pen to paper and actively do it as well.
So I think you kind of talked about this a little bit, but sort of at what point do you think an artist or a curator should really start applying for these programs? Do they need a specific idea in mind or have a project already going? Like, what's the right time?
What's the right time to apply?
Yeah.
I think any time is right. If the artist is ready to put themselves out there, and it's a challenge, right? Especially if you're applying to a residency, you're gonna go to a working space that you're not familiar with, right? You're gonna be socializing, and for some artists, maybe they're not much of a, like they're more of introverts, and socializing with the community isn't something that they do. They like to work on their own. So it takes a lot of effort from the artist in terms of like character and practice. So if an artist is ready to get that kind of exposure and be in front of the public eye that way, I think that's when they're ready. But yeah.
But also you're saying like just apply. Like
Just
if
apply.
you think you're ready, maybe you are.
Yeah, and don't take it personally. And in the sense, it's hard to not take it personally and to think that your work isn't good enough when you get rejected. But it has nothing to do with your work not being good enough. It's more of if your work meets the criteria or meets that artistic style based on where you're applying to. So.
Like, is it really a right fit for the program?
Exactly.
Is it, you know, how the person looking at your application, how did they wake up that morning? There's so much nuance in it.
They have their coffee.
So we've been talking a lot about grants and programs, for, a lot from a more of a kind of a financial support sort of way, but as artists and curators, what other ways can you seek help to advance your careers? What other ways do you find helpful? What support can you get?
You guys could answer.
I think it's so important to like build networks and relationship with other artists, and I think that's where most of everything that I consider success has come from, by meeting other artists and following them and cheering them on and then having them reciprocate. But you're so inspired. You have to constantly be looking at other people's work and looking at it critically. Any type of workshop or classes, I mean, I'm always learning, and I think teaching, being a teacher and a student both propels your creativity and your work in general. So I think it's, you know, just building relationships and having a network of people that you can show your work to and say, what do you think? I think this is working. I think this might not be. Just constantly looking at things critically, not in a negative way, but just to make yourself better.
So are these kind of peer groups, or are they sort of formal advisors?
I've done both. I have done paid workshops, and then in those workshops meet people, and then we meet. Like, I've got several groups going. I just started a new one on Telegram with some artists in Italy and some artists here, where we're giving each other deadlines. So, you know, you gotta just keep doing that kind of stuff, but you learn so much from it. And then you have all these people to help you out as well, so.
I would say the same thing, like networking as an artist or a curator is so important that I think it can happen both ways. It can be very informal. You meet someone by chance and you share your work, they share your work, you get some sort of feedback. And people who are introverted might struggle with it a lot. So I struggle with sharing my work a lot. But meeting the right kind of people who you can share your work with, gain some sort of feedback or support, that's so important. And I think working under someone who does this professionally is really important too. Like for me, like working under a curator in the past, that has helped me learn so much, even though I might have been doing a lot of the grunt work for them. But yeah, so just being around people who do this kind of work is very important. In a social sense, it can be very informal. It can be a workshop or a program as well. But surrounding yourself with people who believe in your work, I think it's really important.
So maybe for some of the artists and curators who perhaps are quite daunted by that, or feel quite isolated and don't really know how, where do you go to find this help? Where are these groups? Where are these peers? You were talking about Telegram and getting artists in Italy. Like, what should they do?
Well, I think you start following people that you like their work and, you know, commenting. And I mean, I think you look at artists or writers page, they're not the ones with 10 million followers. So that, in general, that's maybe not always the case, but you know, all artists want feedback, I think, that's positive and want to know that they've communicated something that means something to people and that they've noticed it and been affected by it. So I think that's a great place to start looking in your local community. For me, GPP in Dubai was like a big turning point for me getting back into art after raising 3 kids. So, you know, you just kind of look at what's around, and workshops or photo walks or whatever your medium is, and you meet people that way.
Definitely. Talking to other creatives, going to community spaces, that's how you have to like get to know other creatives. Even I think if it's a different practice, like photography or any like multidisciplinary work, it helps a lot.
So for the next question, I'll give y'all maybe a little bit of time to think about it as well. So, if you had to think of sort of an anecdote or the one person or the one institution, the one story that really helped you advance your career the most, what would that be?
I can't point out one. I feel like
Are there a few?
I think every stage of my career there were different platforms, people that helped me. I'll start by saying friends. When I was starting my career, my friends were my first clients that were supporting me. And then after that, it grows, right? It goes outside of your circle. But I think the people around you really help you in terms of supporting you. I can't say that one platform, one institute gave me everything. Like recently, I'd say like yes, Qasimi Foundation really helped me. They really supported me, and I got probably the best experience in terms of my artistic career. But I think in every time and period of your career, you're gonna come across whether it's people or platforms that will support you in your own way. So I can't narrow that down at all. But yeah.
So it really it's an amalgamation of so many different, you know,
Yeah.
we talked about it's peer support groups, it's institutional support, but there's, you know, if you're a young artist, maybe it's quite small and local. If you're a more advanced artist or a more experienced artist, it might come from a different source. Abhirami or Kirsten, do you have any anecdotes or?
Well, when I was studying art as a young adult, I had a painter in my family, and she was a very brash, outspoken person. And I remember, you know, really trying to impress her with my painting skills. I'm not a painter, and she just told me that I needed to get out of my own head and just do it. If I wanted to be an artist, to just do it. And I had a similar experience a couple years ago with a photography mentor, kind of the same thing, that told me to stop obsessing. And I think you have this idea that you need to be in your head to create meaningful art, but there's a time where you also need to get out and just create and not think about making something perfect. So now I'm able to make a bunch of crappy stuff and be okay with it, and hopefully something good will come out of it.
Don't be afraid of failure.
Yeah.
I had a teacher in university. She was sort of like, I call her like my academic godmother almost, because she was so supportive of the kind of work that I did and the values that I had, that she was also my mentor when I did my thesis. And she was one of the first people I told when I started doing this program as well. And I think it's always important to have this one person who sort of supports you at all, like whatever you sort of do. And she was also someone who would send across a lot of opportunities where I can share my work, especially during COVID. And I've also realized that you have a lot of invisible supporters as well on social media. Like, I have a very strange relationship with like Instagram in general, but you have a lot of invisible supporters or people you don't really talk to that often who see your work and then take the time out of their day to appreciate it and like shoot a message or like comment or something. And those little things, they sort of compound and they matter as well. So if you have invisible supporters, you should really appreciate them at the end of the day as well. So yeah.
Abhirami, you were talking about higher education there, and I know that the two of you have taught as well, so maybe you can talk to this later as well. How important is it, as you're saying, to have that advisor and finding that advisor that can then go beyond the classroom?
Something that I've really always liked is the idea of that one English teacher who changes the course of your life. So I had one like that too when I was in high school, and then I had a similar one when I was in college as well. I think it's really important when someone validates the kind of work that you do, because when you're young, it's difficult to find that sort of support because people might not take you very seriously because you're young and you don't know what the world outside is doing. Having someone who treats you like an adult and treats your ideas and the work you do with that sense of integrity, it gives you a lot of confidence as you grow older in your practice and you gain more experience, because it says that someone who has that experience, someone who's seen the world outside, believes in the kind of work that you can create in the future. And it gives you that confidence to apply to things like this and say that, okay, I feel good enough or stable enough in my work to be able to do that. And even if their guidance has ended once I graduated university, the sort of things that they teach me at the end of the day, I still carry them with me.
I don't know if either of you have.
You answered it so well. Yeah. So well. She's on point.
phrased.
Yeah.
Then maybe moving on. So as artists and curators who are, seeking opportunities, who are seeking support, funding from institutions and the likes, and also trying to forge careers within the UAE. How can institutions like the Al-Qasimi Foundation, like the Fine Arts Festival, or even governments, how can they better support you? Or artists like you?
I think they need to open up more opportunities to different mediums of art. So I wouldn't just say it would be purely for visual artists in terms of painting or photography or sculpture. I think they should open it up to all kinds of art. So I haven't seen a lot of, say, grants for theater. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see for theater. Yeah, I'd like to see for theater, the performing arts. I've seen for film, but it would be nice to see grants that open up to all types of art, even if it comes to murals, and that would open up the doors to a lot more artists coming out and showcasing their work, rather than constraining it to art just purely just for painting or photography or film. So, yeah.
I would like to give credit though to the Abu Dhabi Cultural Foundation, who do have a performance practice grant.
Okay, good, you told me.
So just a little shout out to them so they don't feel left out. Abhirami or Kirsten, if you have anything to add, just purely from your own experience, like what is it that you're looking for when you're applying for grants or elsewhere, and what would be helpful to you to advance your careers?
I think the idea of accessibility becomes really important here, because when you go to a museum or a gallery, you feel like you are an outsider in that space in a sense. So any way that these institutions or bodies can become more accessible to like the normal person and make them feel at home with the kind of public programs they do, kind of outreach that they do, that enables people at different stages of their career to sort of come in and do a lot of these projects. I think it will give artists the validation or the confidence that, I can also be in this museum or this institution or whatever. So I know that Al Sirkal Avenue in Dubai does that a lot. They have this very active public program calendar, and they commission a lot of local artists to create work or like produce work in that space. So that really pushes a lot of people to then create work and become active contributors to the cultural space. So I like that idea that they're really pushing for people from outside, or not within the walls of the warehouses, to be able to create work.
Like creating spaces that people, regardless of what experience, even if they don't take themselves seriously, or they feel like they're not experienced enough, that this is a space that they are welcoming and can maybe start forming those communities that we were talking about earlier. So at this point, I do want to open it up to the audience if they have any questions for any of our three speakers. Great. So if we can get a mic from a fifth mic. Well, we want to make sure that everyone across the entire site can hear you. All the way in Bait 9, who are currently looking at Perry's work.
You were speaking earlier about the deadlines, and I was wondering if deadlines for either one of you as artists inhibit your work, or would you stake out the so when you're commissioned to do work, or you know there's a deadline, it might push you to finish the work, but does it take away from the quality as you see it of the work?
That's a really good question, Rania. It depends how much time they give you, I feel. Like, I do feel sometimes when you have a deadline, some of the works feel a bit rushed. But if you feel that you have a target that you need to finish something, it also kind of brings everything together. I'd say it's hard to say, because if there is no deadline, you wouldn't have like a goal at the end of what you're creating. So if you even if you put a deadline for yourself as an artist, it gives you that goal, like to say, okay, I'm gonna produce this amount of work, and it's gonna fall under this umbrella in terms of a theme. So I think it helps, but at the same time, you shouldn't have that sense of you need to finish now and rush the craft of what you're creating. So you have to give yourself enough time, headspace to create, and you also have to give enough time for yourself to do the research properly. So, yeah, it's a good question.
I think deadlines are really good, but I work well under pressure. For this opportunity, the work was already done. There were a few changes that needed to be made, but I'm always setting deadlines for myself. So, in fact, one of the photos that's in Bait 7, I vividly remember wanting, you know, it was one in my list of ideas for the series, and I needed certain conditions to take it, and when that day came, I was so tired. But I, you know, because I had set the deadline for myself, really pushed to take it and got the picture that I wanted. So I'm good with deadlines, but they can be stressful for some people.
And sometimes we set the deadlines for you. Abhirami, if you have anything to add, or we can...
I've worked on a project in 2020 where I found out about the project 5 days before the deadline, and I've never been in a more like stressful headspace than I ever was working on that project. And sometimes when I look back on it now, I'm like, oh, I could have done a much better job if I found out 10 days prior to it. So I do agree that it puts you in a headspace where you have to like push yourself to really work, but that can sometimes be really detrimental as well, because you might not produce the work to the quality you want it to be, or you finish the work and it's gone out, and then you're like, oh, I could have done this so much better if I had more time, and it freaks you out a little bit. But I do work well under pressure, and that's okay as well. But yeah, it's a bit stressful to be able to, you know, be very conscious about your work and then wanting to create that perfect sort of work, but then not having like the time or the resources to finish it to its fruition in your head, at least.
Yeah, it's similar in the performing arts, actually, because I'll speak on behalf of some of my old professors and mentors who are not here, but I will share their thoughts on this too. That if in the performing arts, if you book a performance venue and you invest that money into getting it, then you have to have a show by then. And because if you don't have a show, then you're losing, and that is such a motivator to get out and then do it. Are there any other questions from the audience at this time? Oh, we have one. Yep, just down the front.
Hello, and thank you again. You're also inspiring. I kind of connected with what you said on just get out of your head and don't obsess too much. I think sometimes that's a barrier, especially for me. So my question would be, like, when you're setting up your proposals, I think for me, each time I get like a block, each time I reach the budget part of it. So like, what advice would you give? Like, how would you break it down? And it kind of like makes me okay. Thank you.
So budgeting in terms of materials and sources, yeah, that's not easy. It's not easy. That for me, that was always the hardest part to fill out. but I always give myself an estimation, and I go based on the materials that, you know, when you buy your materials and your artworks, based on that, you give yourself an estimation, and I put that budget, because out of experience, I think even when you put down the budgeting, and what helps now is when you apply for certain grants, they tell you how much your material budget is. So I wouldn't say, well, I was trying to be not, I wouldn't try to go over that budget, and I wouldn't try to devalue myself either. So I'd always be like right in the middle, because you never know how much you're gonna spend, and things change, and your work during the time you're creating, it's gonna change. You might find yourself using less from that budget or using more. So I'd always say hit the middle, don't go over, don't go too little, and then hopefully when you do get accepted, things are gonna change and you're gonna understand more in terms of calculating your costs. Yeah. Right.
That's really good advice. I don't think I have anything to share. I'm lucky my medium isn't very expensive unless you're printing, and I didn't have to do that for this exhibition.
I will say from the funder's point of view as well, is that we know that things change, and that the idea that you might propose might be adapted through time. So you're not set in stone with what that proposal and that budget that you put in. So give it the best ideation of what you propose. And remember your contingencies. A good 10% is usually a good contingency to put in as well. Unexpected expenses always come up. Are there any other questions? Anyone? Oh, yep, down the front again.
Thank you first for your time and for your presence here. Really appreciate it. My question, I think it's more for Ethan on the funder side.
I'm not on this panel.
But I think if you guys share your experience might be helpful too. But I was wondering if what are the funders they look like the most on the proposal side, and if networking with the funders would be helpful in getting like into the process, at least, or in the early stages of it.
I will say yes, it is. It's not necessary. Abhirami and Kirsten, we hadn't met before we gave the grant. Perry had been a previous artist at the festival, which did help her application, but, and I can't talk for all institutions giving grants, but personally, like, relationships are key. We want you to be an easy person to work with. So if you can show that early on, we want to like you. If we like you, it does really help your application. But you can show that in the interview process as well. But it's also it's about research. So if you're showing an interest and an effort that is beyond what the other applicants, then it's like applying for any other job. If you've done the research in advance and your application is fitting what we're looking for, and one of the best ways of finding that out is by asking. So I think it definitely helps, but there are also some institutions that won't respond to that because there are just so many people who are interested. But it's worth a shot, and maybe someone doesn't apply to your email, but why not try? Just kind of, we're still going to start to wrap up soon, but I would be interested to know from y'all, when you're writing your applications, or when you've been accepted and you came in with a specific vision, and maybe that doesn't 100% match up with maybe the grant that you're applying for. In your experience, and I know a couple of you've had this experience before, how much have you shifted your vision, and how do you wrestle with that to try and make your vision work with the institution who's maybe supporting you?
I think you have to stay true to your work, though. I wouldn't apply to something just for the sake of shifting that and molding it to be able to get accepted. To a certain extent, maybe very little, you have to be, I guess, culture conscious, and certain things you have to be aware of, you know. But I feel you have to be very true to your work and stand by what you are proposing. And if you are very confident that what you're proposing is different and you have a passion behind it, and you know you have the right amount of research that you can actually execute the work, then I think the Institute would totally understand that and see how in depth you've gone into really look into the subject or theme that you're applying to. But yeah, that's why I go back based on when artists look up grants or opportunities, I really, really believe they have to do their homework and see if it fits their craft. A lot of the times, and I did this mistake too, a lot of the times as an artist I would go into galleries that were nowhere near my style of work, and I would just apply and I'd be like, oh, I just really, really want to exhibit. And then it wasn't until I looked around the gallery and I realized this is nothing close to what I produce. So it's fair on both ends for yourself of what you're representing and also for the platform that you're applying to. So yeah.
I think this is where like the research part comes back into the conversation as well. Like you need to know what are the places or the institution's values, or like what kind of work are they producing. Because when I was writing my application for this, I kept rereading the festival theme note that was on the website. I was like, okay, what exactly are they talking about? What are the gaps that they are filling in? And then what are the gaps that I can fill in with my kind of work as well? So the kind of research behind the institutional goals or their values, and then how you can marry that with your sort of values or your goals, I think that's the bit that needs to be cracked when you apply for these grants or programs as well.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, you're saying basically don't apply for anything just because it's there and it's an opportunity, but make sure that your application is ready, make sure that you are interested in fitting with what their expectations might be. Just as a final call from the audience, if you have any other questions at the time? No? If not, then just to wrap up, if you guys have any final words of advice for artists or curators like yourself who are out there wanting to apply for institutional support, whether it's workshops, programs, funding, anything. So maybe Abhirami, we can start with you and go down.
I think you should always seek inspiration or knowledge, and you need to see different kinds of perspectives, not just ones that match with yours, but also things that are polar opposite to your sort of interests. And you need to just be on the lookout for different kinds of inspiration, like whether it's online, visiting places, talking to people, because then you really grow with the kind of work that you want to do, and then it helps you figure out what your individual voice is at the end and how you can contribute to a very fastly growing cultural landscape as well.
I think we're really lucky to live someplace so dynamic, and there's just constantly new things opening and new ideas, and it's just a country that's so into new ideas and innovation. So just keep looking, and there's just so many opportunities, and they just keep happening more and more.
Yeah, I think exactly. I think it's the research and looking, networking. I also think you have to attend events, attend as much as you can, because like you can't be just an artist locked in your studio and producing work. You have to see other people's work, attend the events, get a sense of the vibe, sense of the people, the art enthusiasts, what they're looking for, and then you'll be able to better understand yourself as well in your work.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the audience and everyone from the rest of the site who are listening in as well. So yeah, that's Abhirami Suresh, who's our RAKFAF Curatorial Development Program curator. Her work is in Bait 8. Kirsten Decker, who is our U.S. mission to the UAE Artist Grant artist. Sorry, her work is in Bait 7, and Perryhan El-Ashmawi, who is our artist-in-residence for the Qasimi Foundation, and her work is in Bait 9. So thank you all three of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if anyone would like to ask questions to these three wonderful people or to me, we'll be around for a little bit longer. And if not, I'd like to bid you all a very good night.
Thank you.